The Princess and the Human, Book 2 Chapter 12, and this definitely is as fast as we can go, Your Highness, I understand the urgency, the pilot assured her, but if we go any faster than this, the reactor might overheat. We will reach the entrance point in about 6 days, that's the best we can do, Silvani sighed. She knew it was pointless. The ship was as fast as it was, there was no way to change that. That didn't make the situation any easier to accept. Hearing that Nadine had suddenly fallen severely ill had riled her up to a degree she didn't reach often. Leaving the bridge, the princess went down to the quarters. The door to Nadine's cabin was open. Inside, she could see the small alien sleeping in her bed, which usually bent much further than for any other user. But that was about the only thing that was as usual. Her red face and heavy breath showed her suffering, even though she wasn't conscious. It was truly disheartening to see her like that. While she had struggled mentally, at least on a physical level the human had always seemed so unstoppable. Silvani of course knew that this durability had limits, but seeing her reduced to this state was something else. Memories of Kirtin in his hospital bed flashed through her mind. Next to her sat Dr. Githay, wearing what looked like a set of welder's gloves. The doctor was currently in the process of wringing out a piece of cloth over a bucket before putting it on Nadine's forehead. "How is she?" Silvani asked, catching the doctor's attention. "I apologize, Your Highness. I didn't see you. I couldn't care less about formalities right now. This is more important." After a short pause, the doctor nodded and returned her attention to Nadine. "Unfortunately, I can't really tell. It seems like she is more or less the same, but I don't know anything about how the human body reacts to illnesses. The fact that it can heat up to lethal temperatures just so hopefully, they can survive it longer than the pathogen is, crass, to say the least. It's a good thing that she took off her protective suit before going to sleep. With my complete equipment, I might be able to do more, but for now, we have to trust Nadine's words and what little I learned about her kind so far. That didn't exactly inspire a lot of hope. The broth she wanted should be done soon," the doctor continued. "Maybe that improves her condition." The princess cocked her head. "Broth?" It seemed like she missed something there. "And what are you doing right now?" she inquired, pointing at the wet cloth. She wanted that, but she fell asleep before she could tell me why exactly. "My guess would be that it cools off the brain a bit to protect it from the increased body heat." "And what are the gloves for?" "They look like the ones the mechanics usually wear." "That's because they are. Our board engineers gave them to me. Nadine is currently secreting large quantities of her sweat. I won't get around touching her, so I had to improvise. On that note, please don't get too close, Your Highness. But besides the hazard, there is another problem. She said she will need to drink a lot. And she needs a lot of water to begin with. And since sweat contains water, I have to assume this increases her need for water even further." Silvani recalled the conversation she had with one of the servants back on the Unifier about why they had needed to leave soon. "And we don't have enough water," the doctor nodded. "Not if the amount she drank before going to sleep is any indication. We definitely have enough for the next few days, but I'm not sure it'll last for the entire way. So in essence, we need to find a way to make our water drinkable for her." "The special powder won't be enough?" "Well, maybe," Githay explained. "It might be able to at least saturate the water so it at least wouldn't harm her anymore. But I didn't test how the mixture reacts under these circumstances, plus our supply of that is limited as well. Finally, we would probably need a lot more of the powder to saturate the water than Nadine needs daily, and while I don't know whether or not humans can suffer from nutrient overdoses, right now is a pretty bad time to test this. I apologize if I sound demanding, Your Highness, but we shouldn't do that unless we can't come up with another way. Or we manage to cure her somehow. And, you have no idea what could achieve that?" Silvani inquired, even though she could already guess the answer. "Not here. As I said, ships like this one only have the basics. If I had all my equipment, things might be different. I also had the faint hope that she'd know herself any substances that might help her, but while their long lives allow humans to educate their children in a wide range of fields, even for them, medicine is something you need to specialize in. If I think about the things an old human doctor with generations worth of experience could tell me, no, that's not important. My point is, outside of the simple treatments I'm already doing. She couldn't tell me much. The doctor went quiet for a moment, seemingly thinking about something, although she mumbled something about a box. But she described it with a word that didn't get translated, and she fell asleep right after, so I couldn't ask her for details. A box? Silvani thought. I feel like that's ringing some kind of bell, but I can't put my finger on it. A box. Well, obviously Nadine has used a multitude of things that could be called a box, but none of them would help her here. Come on, think. What am I forgetting right now? Unable to reach a solution, she let out a frustrated sigh. Just how by the first ones did that happen? It's my fault, the doctor immediately said. I felt safe in the knowledge that both Vannery and Tystri as well as Vannery and humans were too different for a cross-species infection and didn't consider the possibility of humans and Tystri being similar enough for it. So, this is the same illness that killed all those Tystri? Silvani inquired, perturbed by the idea of the potential answer. By process of elimination, it has to. She couldn't have caught anything from any of us, and there are no other humans here. Unless she happened to coincidentally catch something else with a high incubation time. She must have caught it on the unifier. Then, will this kill her? She asked with dread in her voice. I don't know. The lethality rarely is the same for different species, so I tried to remain cautiously optimistic. The doctor changed the wet cloth on Nadine's forehead for a new one. What I can't comprehend is how she got it. Both explanations I can come up with are equally unlikely. Either the germs were resistant to the disinfection process and I brought them with me, but even among similar species, the chance of them jumping over from such a short exposure is close to zero. Or the ambassador is lying, this disease isn't new, and she carries it. Nadia had enough contact with her that a species jump would be at least slightly possible. But she would have to be an asymptomatic carrier for that, and considering how devastating this illness is to the Tystri, although all the corpses I've seen were male, and the sexual dimorphism of their kind is quite pronounced, maybe. The doctor started to fall into one of her ramblings, slowly going off topic and causing Silvani to pay less and less attention. When she had found out that there was no attack happening, when Nadine brought up the colony, it had seemed like things would finally take a turn to the positive. Like she finally found a clue that might lead her to reunite with the other humans. Wait, Doctor, HM? My apologies, Your Highness, did you say something? I just thought of something. What if this illness didn't need to, change, in order to infect her? You mean mutate, the doctor corrected. But it had to, otherwise a Tystri disease couldn't infect a human. That's exactly my point. What if this isn't a Tystri disease? What if it already, how did you call it, jumped? In the other direction, the doctor's eyes widened from the sudden epiphany. That would mean, oh no. If the illness originates from a human, then this could be. I would need to start completely anew. First ones, why did we leave her escape pod behind? Escape pod? Silvani asked, confused by the sudden change in topic. Yes, the one we found her in. It wouldn't be a stretch to assume humans put some basic necessities in their escape pods, just like we do, and maybe some medicine as well. I know we couldn't take it with us, but it could have been, that's it. The sudden outcry made the doctor startle and flinch back. But Silvani didn't care. The box, she continued. That's what she meant. Before we left the Star Treader, Nadine wanted to see the escape pod to check if any humans had responded to the emergency signal. When there were none, she took a small, red box with her. If nothing happened to it, it should still be in the palace. Hope suddenly returned to the doctor's expression. If we make it home in time, we might be able to help her. Even better, I might even be able to reverse engineer the medicine. Silvani closed her eyes and nodded. With a silver lining in sight, the next pressing matter was to find a way to ensure the humans' water supply would last, and then they'd just need to make it back. Nadine, please stay strong. The Princess and the Human, Book 2, Chapter 13. We interrogated her thoroughly, Your Highness. She swears that she never heard of this illness prior to her departure. Silvani quietly sighed, making sure she wasn't heard through the speaker. She had already expected this answer. After all, Nadine had already spoken with the former ambassador back on the Unifier. But she couldn't just sit around doing nothing, hoping that they would reach Homie in time. The doctor was doing all she could, and if Silvani could maybe find out some additional information, it might make things a bit easier. And how believable would you estimate what she said to be? She was both very frustrated and distressed. So she was difficult to talk to. I dug as deep as I could over the last few days, and while I can't say it with certainty, I would tend to believe her, the captain of the escort ship where Kikla was currently being held. And what about other humans? Did she really never meet one other than Nadine? She said if they had already contacted humanity, she wouldn't have bothered talking to you, Your Highness. Apologies for the rude tone, I am merely quoting her. It's fine. Thank you, Captain. She closed the communication channel and leaned back in her chair. 4 more days until they would reach the hyperlane, and then an additional one to get to Homie. 5 more days during which she could do little more than hope. The concept of a morning was fairly relative when in space. Since tasks usually had clearly structured rotations, most people would still follow a consistent day-night cycle equivalent, but that didn't apply to everyone. Githe was one of those it didn't apply to, especially now. In her attempt to help Nadine as much as she could, the current phases of her being awake and asleep no longer followed the timetable of Homie's rotation. But in the purpose of her own schedule, one might call the current time morning, even if one only did that to say that morning came too soon. Of course, if the doctor had wanted to keep sleeping, then nothing would have stopped her. But with Nadine's status still critical, she couldn't sleep more than necessary. She quickly left her bedroom and walked through the metal corridor, once more passing different people than the morning before. After all, their morning was now, at a different time. She carefully opened the door to see whether the small alien was still asleep. But to her surprise, not only was Nadine not asleep, she wasn't in her bed at all. Nadine? Githe called out, mildly shocked. I'm here, document. Quickly turning, she spotted her missing patient next to the door. She hung from the ceiling by one arm, holding to a metal beam at the ceiling that, thankfully, looked sturdy enough to support her weight. She continuously repeated the motion of pulling her body up and lowering herself again right afterward. Her other arm was behind her back, and her legs were crossed and angled. The way she held herself made her face the wall, so Githe could only see her from behind. What are you doing? You need to rest. I need to stimulate my muscles, you know that, the alien girl said in an unusually neutral tone. Nadine, it's great that you apparently feel better. But if you do this so soon, who knows what damage you will do to yourself? The doctor pleaded. She didn't get too close though, since the alien girl wasn't wearing her protective suit at the moment. If I don't do this, I know exactly what damage it will do, Nadine retorted. I wasn't able to do it for the last couple of days, I have to compensate. Besides, seems like it really was just a cold anyway. Githe noticed that the hand behind her back, balled to a fist, was shaking. Just Nadine, you caught an illness that decimated a planet within a couple of days. Do you think I don't know that? The sudden outcry made Githe flinch. It was very rare that Nadine got loud, but when she did, she got loud. 2 passing crew members threw concerned looks through the open door, so she quickly collected herself and gestured to them that everything was fine. Meanwhile, Nadine had dropped down from the ceiling and turned around, showing a distorted expression on her face. She raised her fist and slammed it onto the bed, making the mattress shake in the process. After 2 months, it finally looked like I had a lead. And what do I find out instead? That I'm not only having a world of cardboard situation and am a walking vat of acid, no, on top of that I'm apparently a full-blown biohazard. Not to us, Githe quickly corrected. Humans and Tystri being compatible enough is an unfortunate coincidence. It happened before with different species, though not to this extent, I admit, and in none of these cases did the illness jump species that quickly. I meant it when I said nothing like that can happen between Vannery and human, I just once again didn't consider a crucial detail. How many times does that make now? The room went silent after Nadine's last line, and the small alien's eyes immediately widened in regret. I didn't mean to. I didn't want. She began as she buried her face in her hands and leaned back against the wall. Doc. I am so sorry. You do so much, for me and everyone, and damn it. Nadine slid down to the floor and rested her head on her knees. Look, I know how shitty that sounds, but can we pretend the last minute didn't happen and start this conversation over? Githe didn't answer right away. Instead, she slowly walked over to the other side of the room and sat down on a wall-mounted chair. Quietly, she looked at Nadine, who after a while lifted her head with a desperate expression. Words coming from or directed at a noble are not easily forgotten. Luckily for you, I am only a noble in the first generation and wasn't raised as one. I'm really sorry, Doc, no offense taken. That wasn't completely true, especially since Githe had told herself something similar before. But that wasn't helpful at the moment, and despite being younger, Githe was still the adult one of the two. I know this is a difficult situation for you. But you should mind your words more, especially when outside the palace. Her Highness and the Lord General are not representative of your average nobles. Just to have it said. But more importantly, what makes you so sure you are fine? This isn't like with the ethanol. You literally looked like you were on the verge of death over the last few days. Nadine shrugged, not sure what I can tell you there, but this is fairly normal. I mean, I did get hit with a pretty nasty one and I felt like shit, but it was still somewhat normal for a cold, still assuming it was one. There are much worse illnesses, a few days with fever and a runny nose is kind of the bottom line. So. That's it? After a few days in a state like that, you just are suddenly fine again? If you word it like that it sounds a bit dumb, but. Yeah, pretty much. One more day, and I'm probably back at 100%. It's nothing noteworthy, it's common for a human to catch a cold once or twice a year. If you're healthy, it's not really something to fear. I never thought it would be like the Black Death, to others. She once more buried her head in her arms, just. How did? We can figure that out later. The more pressing issue is how to stop it. Nadine looked up again, shifting her expression to one that included her eyes being more narrow. Yes, you're right. Before we left the Star Treader, Syl and I went to my escape pod. I took the board pharmacy with me. The doctor cocked her head. You took the what now with you? Nadine seemed confused that she didn't know the word, the bandage box. Bandage. Do you mean a first aid kit? Yeah, first aid kit, I guess. Stupid translator. With a quick motion, she took the collar translating her words off her neck. Could you say it Aegean? Despite her accent, it was impressive how much she had learned since she arrived on Homie. She could likely even get rid of it in the near future, considering she was able to hold her speech in the courtroom nearly without it after rehearsing often enough. First aid kit, the doctor repeated, first aid kit. Okay. She put the translator back on. This thing gets pretty wonky when I use words you technically have but not use in a particular context. Does it sound normal to you when I say cold? Anyway, there should be cold medicine in that thing. Though all I can do is give to the stuff, I have no idea about medicine outside of the basics. Githe nodded. That is already much more than I expected. And to answer your question, the word cold does get translated, though it's an interesting name for an illness. Well, we often catch it when our body gets too cold, maybe that's why. Never really thought about it if I'm honest. I'm sure it also has a medical name, but I don't know it. I see. Well, either way, there is one more issue. Githe explained the water situation. While sick, Nadine had used up a large portion of her water supply. It likely would last for all of the remaining 4 days. Doc? I think you misunderstood something there, Nadine began once Githe had detailed everything. Well, I guess we never talked about that again after you made that powder. You see, I need all of that stuff, sure, especially now that I sweated a lot. But the most important thing is the water itself. It doesn't need to be perfectly saturated, it just has to be not so pure that it makes my cells explode. That can be achieved by mixing literally anything that's not poisonous in there. Remember what I did on the radar? It sounded like she purposefully left out the word karaska, and yet, she still shuddered slightly saying it. But now that she said it, Githe did indeed recall that she mixed blood from some unknown animal they found in the karaska's supplies into the water. Githe felt a lot of tension leave her, now that the most pressing issues were resolved. But overall, things were far from over. A lot of questions were still left unanswered. If the other humans were involved, where were they now? What exactly had happened on Eros? Where was the human ship? Had all of this really been a coincidence? The Princess and the Human, Book 2 Chapter 14, Homie came into view as the two ships left the hyperlane. The time passing no longer felt as slow as it did before, now that they weren't in a race against time anymore. Well, they technically hadn't been before either, but they hadn't known that. Nadine meanwhile had dedicated the entire time since her recovery to her exercises, claiming she needed to compensate for the time she had missed. However, Silvani assumed that wasn't the only factor that motivated her to do this. Half a day later, as the planet kept getting closer, Silvani ordered a comm channel to be opened to their escort vessel. Onric, there is no need for further protection from here on out. Fly ahead and bring the prisoner to the Kalhanar hospital. She is to be detained and examined there. I will give further instructions to the head physician directly. You just need to get her there and make sure she has no contact with our ship or anyone on board. We can't risk her getting infected. Understood, Your Highness. The captain of the Onric affirmed and closed the channel. Through the window, she could see the ship next to them accelerate and slowly change course. That was when Dr. Githe stepped next to the princess. Your Highness, I finished listing all the samples I would like them to procure from her. It'll be good to have some healthy tissue to compare to the infected samples. Good. We'll send them a message as soon as we get in reach. Nadine says she shouldn't be infectious anymore, the doctor continued, but considering we're talking about a mutation, it would be best not to risk it. Your Highness, if I may, the acting captain of their current ship raised his voice. First of all, I apologize if it sounds like I am questioning you, I would never. But I couldn't help but wonder, isn't that Taistri sentenced to death anyway? What difference does it make if she dies of an illness? Silvani eyed the soldier. Normally, a captain appointed to a ship she was on knew at least some basics of politics, but when they had left the planet in a hurry, they couldn't afford to get picky about the crew. The difference is that there is a proper way of doing things, Captain, she decided to say, refraining from giving a lengthy explanation to someone not versed in the matter. There was also the fact that the High Council hadn't affirmed her execution yet. That might have seemed pedantic considering the current circumstances, but Silvani highly doubted that the illness had been able to eradicate the Taistri entirely. There had to be survivors, one way or the other. There also was the potential involvement of the human ship. Say, doctor, she began, following a sudden thought. Is there a scenario where humans could have evacuated the healthy Tystri without infecting them? Sure, the doctor affirmed without hesitation. Two alien species being compatible enough is already highly unlikely, though not unprecedented. But on top of that, a virus-jumping species should take way longer than a few days of contact, even if the mutation rate is as high as Nadine says. As long as they wouldn't get the mutated virus on board, the chances of it happening again in such a short time would be astronomically low. That was good to know. This ideal scenario was unfortunately not very likely considering that there had been a lot of indicators that the Tystri had on top of everything else also been attacked. Or the attack and the evacuation are somehow connected. And if this species jump, as the doctor calls it, really is that unlikely? Could there be another factor we're not aware of? Either way, we need more information. The sun over the harbor town was about to set when their shuttles landed in front of the Star Palace. As soon as the doors opened, Nadine rushed inside and darted toward the east wing. While the doctor oversaw the servants who carried her frozen samples, Silvani made a call for Maida to see whether she had missed anything during their absence. However, the head maid didn't even have the chance to get to her when Nadine already returned. Found it, she gasped, with breaths so heavy that they were quite loud. Silvani couldn't help but wonder if this was what their breaths sounded to the small alien all the time, relatively speaking. In her hands, Nadine held the same red box that Silvani had seen her procure from the escape pod back on the Star Treader. Now that she looked at it from up close, she noticed a green square with a white cross in it painted in the middle, as well as some symbols at the side. Human letters maybe? The doctor joined them and Nadine sat down on the stairs, put the box on her knees, and opened it. Taking a peek inside, the princess saw a lot of strange, flat packages that looked vastly different from anything the Vannery used, as well as a few other things. Okay, let's see. Disinfectant, tape, antibiotica. Ah, here. Cold medicine. She pulled out one of the items that was so full of tiny letters that almost seemed gray from a distance. She then started reading, but the doctor quickly interrupted her. Nadine. I didn't understand a single word you said after ingredients. The small alien looked puzzled, but shouldn't. Ah, damn it. The translator works with intent, and I don't have any intent because I have no idea what these words mean. We can still work with this, the doctor assured her. I can still analyze it and test how they react to different things. I highly doubt this medicine can be used for other species as it is anyway, and I wouldn't be surprised if some ingredients turned out toxic to the Tystri. But should be a good starting point. Also, can I take a look at the other stuff once this matter is resolved? Doctor. The princess reprimanded her. Apologies, Your Highness. May I work together with the Royal Research Institute on this? Yes, I will give you a letter of attorney. The doctor left for her office. Silvani couldn't help but notice that Nadia seemed a bit disheartened by the newest development. Had she hoped for a different result? At some point during their conversation, Maida had approached them. Now, with the doctor gone, she spoke up. Your Highness? You wanted a report about the occurrences during your absence. Yes. The details can be left for the written report. For now, just limit it to the important issues for now. The head maid made an affirming bow. Very well. First, there was a message from the head of Clan Silpiine. They were inquiring regarding an offer that was apparently made to their heiress and the heir of Clan Ryler. There is no documentation about such an offer, so I told them I couldn't give them an answer until you returned. Ah, right, that's on me, Nadine chimed in and stood up. Standing on the stairs as she actually was at eye level for once. That was during my meeting with them. We learned about the attack and left right after. So it kinda got swept under the rug because of that. It was about the idea we discussed. Having the heirs of noble clans work here as part of their education, remember? I do remember, Silvani affirmed. So you think these two would be good candidates to test your idea? I do, yes. The timing is actually good, with everything we found out. A lot of work will come up. I will have to meet with other alliance members to discuss the issue. The extra hands will be of great help. Not that we would need them if commoners doing government work wouldn't be such an issue, the alien girl quietly mumbled. And, well, she wasn't wrong. Silvani hadn't heard of Clan Ryler for a while now, despite them holding the rank of Duke. The princess took a moment to dig through her memory, then she recalled the news about the accident. Correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't heir of Clan Ryler lose his eyesight when the previous Duke and Duchess died? Nadine blinked. I don't know, they didn't talk about how it happened, but yes, he is blind. But I still think we should make the offer to him. I have some ideas. Silvani cocked her head. I don't want to sound like I'm dismissing your proposal outright, but you must be aware, I am. And the rest I can guess. Nadine paused and took a deep breath. I'm sorry, I know I sound selfish. But when I saw him, I was reminded of back on Earth. She stopped, seemingly having trouble putting her thoughts into words. What I'm trying to say is, I believe we can make this work. Can you trust me on this? Are you sure now is the best time for this? Nadine didn't answer immediately, giving Silvani a moment to think about the matter as well. The issue wasn't just the prejudice of the other high-ranking noble clans, the matter at hand was also highly unusual, to say the least. Then again, Nadine seemed passionate about this for some reason. And considering the effects the current situation had on her mental state, maybe having something to take care of would be good for her. And the small alien did have some very useful ideas in the past. Additionally, if Nadine was involved with him directly, there wouldn't be much of Silvani's time lost should whatever she was planning not work. Well, Nadine ultimately said, maybe not the best, but I still think we should. Very well. But I can't really afford many experiments right now. Therefore, you will be the one responsible for him. The human hesitated for a moment before answering with a determined nod. All right. Maida, schedule a meeting with Clan Silpiine so we can discuss the matter. At once, Your Highness. Speaking of the alliance, the messenger you sent to Svegplia returned. The Krasnelv wished to meet with you as well. That also fitted well. Informing the other alliance members about the situation on Eros would take time, so it would be good if they could bridge that by getting one of the meetings done early. Lastly, His and Her Majesty sent word earlier today. They say that, and I quote, now that the matter with the Tystire is resolved, they can return to more pleasant topics, so they wish to talk to you. In person. Silvani sighed, those two are the only ones who would call the matter resolved. How do they even know about it already? Maybe the other ship told them? Nadine suggested. Right, that would be plausible. All right, fine. There are more pressing matters, but they won't care about that. I guess this was due sooner or later, we didn't have much interaction recently. Might as well get this over with. Will they visit or do they expect me to come? My apologies, Your Highness, it seems my phrasing was misleading, Maida said with a bow. With you, I was referring to both of you. The Princess and the Human, Book 2 Chapter 15. Kirtine was bored, not that it was anything new. Boredom had been accompanying him for as long as he could remember. His parents loved him, but they were always busy with governing. His sister somehow had even less time than they did and also had moved to the other side of the planet. There also wasn't much to say in terms of friends. He had close to no chance of ever becoming king, not that he wanted to. However, that also meant that he wasn't interesting to the noble families and never got invited to anything. The few noble children he did meet never contacted him again. They stated that their schedule is full at the moment, and will give notice once they have a better overview of when they will be available. was what the servants would always say when he ordered them to make contact again. It took a few attempts until he understood what that really meant, and since he, despite everything, was still a prince, playing with commoners wasn't allowed. In other words, he was used to being bored. The difference? Right now, he couldn't do anything against it. Back in the palace, he could go explore, sneak into places he wasn't supposed to go, or play pranks. The latter was the reason why he picked up tinkering as a hobby. It had started a bit under a cycle ago, with him simply wanting some variation in the contraptions he built for his pranks, since always using the same tricks got old after a while. Plus, the servants began seeing through them and they no longer worked. Alas, there was no work to do for a noble with it. Mechanical work was seen as something for commoners, and whenever they found his tools, they would take them away. Okay, granted, that was primarily because he would borrow them without asking from the royal workshops. But he only did that because he wasn't allowed to have tools on his own. Well, trying to secretly sneak out with all the stuff could also be pretty fun. Therefore, the main issue right now was not that he was bored. The main issue was that, unlike before, he had no way to deal with his boredom, because he wasn't allowed to do anything. With his shell weakened, he was at risk of a sudden injury with every movement, which was why the doctors didn't allow him to move at all. And the worst part? He could actually understand why they were doing that. He had felt with his own body what could happen, and he definitely didn't want to repeat that. Still, he hated it. He hated that they didn't allow him to do anything, and he hated even more that he knew that they were right. It hadn't been so bad at first. His parents would visit frequently. He would remotely talk with his sister daily, and after she had finally pulled herself together, with his help, he'd add Nadine would also talk with him a lot. When he was transported to another hospital on the other side of the planet, he had feared they wouldn't be able to talk as much due to the time difference, but that didn't seem to faze her. She told him that she didn't need as much sleep since she was used to shorter days. He had also overheard some stories from the doctors. Apparently, she had saved his sister's life and even caught the culprit. When he heard that, he recalled how she told him that there was no getting away from a human. Heh, served that assassin right. But then, almost 30 days ago, he suddenly hadn't been able to reach her anymore. He had tried to contact his sister, but it was the same for her. He didn't know how to reach the Star Palace through the official channel, so he ended up calling the Sun Palace and ordering a servant there to make the call in his stead. The answer he got back was simply that both Nadine and his sister were unavailable at the moment, and that he didn't have the clearance level for any further information. It had almost been like, no, this was different. It had to be. Nadine wasn't like that. She always had time for him, and the days since he had met her had been the most fun he ever had. Even if none of his pranks worked on her. Also, whatever she was currently tied up with, his sister was involved as well. So, yeah, it obviously wasn't like that. It made no sense. Why would he even think that? Still, what by the first ones were they doing that he wasn't even allowed to know what it was generally about? Whatever it was, he didn't like it. Because no matter how used he was to boredom, the last 30 days had easily been the most boring of his life. Sure, his parents still called daily and visited on occasion. But that was more to see if he was fine. There wasn't much he could talk about with them. Things had begun to be so boring, he even had done what he would have never thought he'd do. He, on his own, went through his study material. It would soon be time for him to choose what job he wanted to get educated for. But government officials, advisors, managers, doctors, and so on. None of these professions seemed interesting. Or, he could hire some commoners and form his own company, but what would that be about? He had no idea what he would want to make, plus it meant getting a boring economic education. And even if there was something he would like to do, he would need to learn from his hospital room. It was so annoying. "Your Highness, are you awake?" He heard a nurse ask from outside, "Yes, you can come in." "You have a visitor," the nurse announced after opening the door. "Is it mother or father?" "Neither, it's a foreign noble called." Um. One moment please." Seemingly having forgotten the name, the nurse pulled out a datapad, leaving Kirteen confused. Wasn't this the most prestigious hospital on the planet? How would wait, does the visitor have a weirdly long name starting with Nadine? He asked. Yes, the nurse affirmed. Here, got it. Yes, your visitor is Lady Nadine Val. Who cares, what the hell are you waiting for? He interrupted. Nadine was visiting him. In person, no less. He hadn't seen her in person ever since the incident in the forest. Apologies, Your Highness, but what the... What? Ah, I used one of Nadine's phrases again, just bring her up already. Ah, yes, at once. The nurse left. Shortly after the door opened again. She looked just like the last time he had seen her in person. Hey, her soft voice greeted him, where were you? He quickly asked in an accusing tone, yeah, sorry. Something came up, we had to scramble and didn't have time to notify you. Scramble? Wait, did you go off-world? That explained why he couldn't contact her. Yeah, it was really urgent. Again, I'm sorry we couldn't tell you. That's not the point, he mumbled and looked up at the ceiling. You missed my first molting. Nadine went quiet for a few tigs before answering, oh, sorry. Kirteen sighed. It apparently wasn't really her fault, and it wasn't like she could do more than say sorry now. Still, he had really wanted her to be there when it happened, at least on the call. By the way, how come you're here? Oh, we had something to do in the capital, and I thought you would like it if I showed up. Well, I do, he quietly admitted. Thanks for dropping by. He then turned his head to face her again, but you'll still have to make up for the time you were gone. Now that he got a closer look, he saw something he hadn't noticed yet. Under her usual clothes, she wore another set of clothes that fit tightly and seemed to cover everything from the neck. Were humans really that obsessed with covering their bodies? Actually, on a second glance, it looked more like protective gear, but what would she of all people need protection from? Wouldn't it rather be the other way round? He jokingly thought. Then, it clicked. Oh. I think I can do that, she answered his previous statements, pulling the prince out of his thoughts. I got something for you. Took a while, but it got finished while I was gone. Where's your datapad? Here, on the nightstand, he said, pointing to the other side of the bed. What was she planning now? Not that he was someone who would say no to gifts, but why would she need his datapad for it? So, you remember how I told you that other than your language, I was learning something else I didn't want to tell you about? She said with a smile as she connected a small device to the datapad. I'm learning the Vannery way to code. I originally wanted to do this all by myself, but that might have been a bit ambitious. That I barely knew your alphabet and language didn't help. So, yeah, the tutor did a lot of the heavy lifting here, and also the final touch as I mentioned. Didn't want me to do anything on it at first, work of a commoner, yada yada yada. Seriously, I had to pull the my culture is different, don't insult it card. Anyway, I hope I'll be able to make the next one myself. The next what? Okay, I'm done. Can you hold the pad or wait? Suddenly, Nadine's gemstone-like eyes lit up. If you molted. Does that mean you're better now? Well, the new shell also got damaged, but not as badly as they feared, so I don't have to be as careful as before. I'm still not allowed to move a lot unless under supervision from a doctor though. So leaving the bed on my own isn't going to happen anytime soon. But it's at least an improvement. When I molt again things should be fine. Nadine's gaze fell. That's not going to happen for another 4 to 5 cycles though, right? Stop. But I know what you want to say, and we've been through this. The silence then hung in the air for a moment, so Kirteen decided to go back to the original topic. He pressed a button and from the nightstand extended a simple contraption made to hold the datapad. You can put it in here. Using it like that is no problem. Nadine took a deep breath and nodded. Okay, what I was about to say, I can't believe you guys don't have video games. I started with something retro, for the aforementioned reasons, but even by that metric, it's very bare bones since I didn't have any assets I could use. Anyway, it's made as a plug-in to the program used for video calls, that way we can start it during a call and play online with each other. That actually was the part that took the longest to make function. Kirteen just stared at his friend. I have no idea what you just said. A faint smile appeared on Nadine's face, then let's let it speak for itself. And so Nadine showed him. It was indeed very simple, merely making a grid appear in which each of the boxes could be filled out either bright or dark, and through the call, they both could do so. Each of them would choose bright or dark and then try to get 4 of the same in a row. After a demonstration game, Kirteen told Nadine to not hold back. The result was 9 losses in a row, and that's 4. 10 losses, sorry, Nadine said with a smile. But it's fun, right? Yeah, it is, he agreed. The losses were a bit frustrating, but it definitely beat lying around. And we can play that even if you're in the Star Palace? Whenever we can make a call, we can play it. In theory. At least. I couldn't exactly test that. We'll just have to see. But couldn't you have just painted the grid on a board and made some way to mark the boxes? I don't know, different colored trinkets or something. Then you could place the datapad so it transmits the boards. I could just tell you where you should place my trinkets. Nadine said nothing in response. She looked straight ahead, then blinked, still said nothing, then blinked again. Well, you have to think beyond that. I have laid a foundation here. For example, we can use the exact same program to play Othello. A bit of tweaking and we got checkers. If I get my hands on some assets, we can play chess. There were more games they could play like this? Well, it seemed like he wouldn't be bored for the rest of his stay. Still, are those also ones we could play with a board through the camera? Well, yes, but board games are just the start. Single player. If we can make the program able to play, you could also do it on your own when nobody else has time. There are games that are even specifically designed for single player. And just wait for what happens when this spreads and the first video game company gets founded. Company. Wait, it's possible to found a company with this? One of the hair tufts over Nadine's eyes rose. Possible? Kirteen, video games are one of the biggest industries on my planet. It is much more than just possible. Kirteen didn't answer. If his mouth could move the way Nadine's could, he would probably wear a grin right now. Maybe he had an idea of what to do with himself after all. Nadine's datapad beeped. Sorry, I have to go. Oh, before I forget, Sil had something else to do, but once we're done, she'll visit as well. Okay. Wait, since when do you call her Sil? As far as he knew, only their relatives called her that. Oh, well, that just kinda happened. Why don't I get a nickname? Nadine cocked her head. I mean, your name is shorter to begin with. Plus, it's not like I'm the one who came up with hers. I still want one. Okay, I'll think of something. After she had left, Kirteen thought a bit. This video game had indeed been quite fun. Making more of these. Well, he wouldn't be the one making it, but to make sure more would be made. Maybe studying something boring would be worth it. I wonder what Nadine is learning. She knew a lot about different things, which was strange. Now that he thought about it, how old was she? He had never asked that. It felt like she was older than him, but she herself had said that she was still a child. 7 cycles maybe? 8 at most. Just as Silvani exited her shuttle and entered the Sky Palace's forecourt, she could see another shuttle approach. That had to be Nadine. And indeed, after its landing the small alien exited, flanked by a couple of guards. Once under the open sky again, Nadine gazed at the huge building in front of her. Big, isn't it? Silvani asked. Yeah, but not just that. It looks very different from the other one. Well, it's a lot older. The Sky Palace precedes the Unification War. So this is where you grew up? The princess shook her head. No, the Sky Palace is for government work. Kirtine and I lived in the Sun Palace, a bit further in that direction. So, how did your visit go? Did you have any issues? Well, being small has its advantages, Nadine answered with a shrug. What does being small have to do with anything? The princess wondered. Oh, I get it. She could hide between her guards so no one could recognize or bother her. That almost makes me envious of her height. Kirtine seems to get better. By the way, is the first molting important? HM? Why do you ask? Oh. Did Kirtine have his? Did we miss it? Yeah. I see, Silvani sighed, slightly disappointed. Well, at least that means he is no longer so vulnerable. But yes, the first molting is seen as the beginning of adolescence and the first step towards adulthood, the latter beginning with the second one. It is considered a special day for us. Oh, so that's why he was so down about it. Yes, the timing was unfortunate. Silvani turned and began walking towards the palace, Nadine following her. So, how do you feel? The princess asked. Better. Talking with Kirtine helped. It always does. Then, are you ready to meet the king and queen of Homi? Would saying no change anything? It wouldn't. Then no. That got a chuckle out of Silvani, although, Nadine continued, going by what you told me, I'm surprised they didn't cancel everything else and insisted on meeting us immediately. They are not that bad, Silvani rectified. Unless Kirtine or myself are threatened, they are reasonable and competent rulers. As long as they don't try to hold a conversation with someone. So. I should probably apologize in advance for whatever they are going to say. Don't worry. I'm basically a commoner, I'm not going to throw a tantrum over hurt honor, or something like that. That will certainly be to your advantage here. I still hope they can at least make it through the greeting before getting inappropriate. Now then, let's get this over with so we can return to more pressing matters. The gate was opened and they entered. Silvani's parents were already awaiting them in the entrance hall. The herald announced both sides, then they closed the distance between them. Mother, father, my greetings. I, as well, offer my greetings to His and Her Majesty, Nadine said, and Silvani was surprised at how much the air around her had suddenly changed. I, Nadine Valentina Esmeralda Anastasia von Claude of House Haydenfeld, daughter of Karl-Heinz and Serena von Claude of House Haydenfeld. Am honored to make your acquaintance. Welcome, Sil, the king responded, and you as well, Lady Nadine, the queen continued. I must say, the length of your name was quite surprising to me when I heard it the first time. Is that a human tradition meant to compensate for your kind short height? Silvani suppressed the urge to groan, not even one's damn sentence. The Princess and the Human, Book 2 Chapter 16, the Queen's insensitive question hung in the air for a few tigs before receiving an answer. No, there is no correlation, Nadine ultimately responded calmly, but from the corner of her eye, Silvani could see that the small alien had balled her gloved hand into a fist that was shaking from exertion, and the princess could hardly blame her. No matter how much the young girl claimed to have a different view on things than the noble Silvani knew, no matter how aware Nadine was that the king and queen weren't doing this intentionally, it was still a blatant display of disrespect towards her. Silvani couldn't ask her to just ignore it. All she could do was hope for Nadine to be able to endure the comments and to see past them. In fact, my name is considered long by human standards as well, she continued. There are also humans notably taller than me, but few reach heights nearing the average Vannery. There was a slight shaking in her voice as she spoke, but overall, she was hiding her agitation well. Hopefully, she would be able to keep this up. How interesting, the king commented. Then, Lady Nadine Valentina Esmeralda Anastasia von Klott, let us continue our talks elsewhere. I guess he assumed only the last part of her name was like a clan name, Silvani wondered. However, as impressed as she was that her father had been able to memorize the entire name and pronounce each part correctly after merely hearing it once. It was hard to not hear mockery in the way he said it, even if it wasn't intended. A quiet, almost inaudible squeaking sound was heard from Nadine's gloves as she clenched her fists even tighter. With a sideways glance, Silvani noticed that Nadine's facial features began to distort a little as if she was pressing her mouth tightly shut. There is no need to say all of my name, Your Majesty, she managed to say. The shaking in her voice had gotten stronger. First ones, and these are just supposed to be friendly talks, the princess mentally sighed. It had been a while since she had witnessed her parents talk to somebody of rank, but they were just as bad at it as she remembered them to be. When they made contact with the human species properly, she needed to make sure they wouldn't meet them. None of Nadine's reactions seemed to deter the king and queen. Although to be fair, this was the first time they were meeting the small alien, and they didn't yet know how to read her nonverbal communication. While Silvani was still fairly sure that it would stay that way no matter how much time they would spend with the human, it at least for now was about the only aspect of this conversation she couldn't hold against them. Ah, good. It was a bit of a chore to say, so was already trying to come up with a way to shorten it. How should we call you then? The queen added. This time, Nadine had to take a few breaths before answering. It depends, she answered, the dignified air around her starting to fade. Well, no matter how unusual, no one wants to hear their own name being called a chore. In formal speech, the last name is used, though in my case, simply saying von Klott would suffice. First names, Nadine, in my case, are usually used in a more informal context. When exactly it is acceptable depends on the specific culture. It did? That was actually news to Silvani as well. The thought was a bit strange though. Why address someone as a member of their clan or the human equivalent rather than as an individual? Nadine had introduced herself with her first name from the beginning, so the princess had assumed that was how humans did it. Had she been unintentionally disrespectful to her? Nadine had never voiced any form of displeasure, but then again, she had been quite wary of her rank during their early interactions. By now, she had no reservations about using Silvani's nickname, so it likely wasn't an issue anymore, but at the beginning, she might have felt different about it. The train of thought made the princess realize just how little she had actually learned about humans. Nadine specifically, sure, but in hindsight, despite knowing her for a while now, they had never talked about human culture. The only exceptions were some very specific details. She needed to rectify that once this was over. I see. Well, there isn't really any reason to be overly formal right now, so please follow us, Nadine. No one told you to drop the honorific. Unlike the human's still tightly shut lips, the rest of her face had now started to gain color, being a bit more reddish in tone. As the king and queen turned around, Nadine swung her right fist and hit her own thigh. Was she trying to vent her anger? Well, she had swallowed the insults well so far. Foreign diplomats in the same situation would have already needed to be appeased more than once at this point, one of the main reasons why trade deals from 10 cycles ago had often been so disadvantageous. It was likely for the best to switch topics and allow the alien girl to calm down a little. By the way, I heard Kirteen finally had his first molting. A shame I missed it. Yes, we rushed to him as soon as we heard about it, her mother affirmed. They reached the conference room and the servant standing in attendance opened the door. "We tried to contact you as well, unfortunately, you had spontaneously gone off-world." "And whose fault do you think that is?" They entered. Compared to the Star Palace, the Sky Palace's conference room was smaller, but also a lot more packed with luxury items, artworks, and other trinkets. There was little inspiration taken from the styles of other alliance members, as it was meant to embody the Vanarese pride. No chairs stood at the table in the middle, instead there was a couch on each side. The king and queen both took a seat on one side, Silvani sat across from them, and after a moment of hesitation, Nadine sat down next to the princess. Her dense body strained the furniture a bit, and the fact that only her head was above the tabletop didn't help the situation as a whole. She would need to set up a special conference room meant for meeting humans in the Star Palace, but the important thing is that he is on the way to recovery, even if it will still take a while, she continued. "Yes, it's a relief to see him so energetic again," Nadine agreed. "Oh, did you meet him?" the king asked, in surprise. "We arrived a bit early since I had something else to do here," Silvani explained, so Nadine decided to pay him a visit. "I will do so as well later on." "I see. Your gesture is appreciated, Nadine." "Oh, that was a given." After what happened?" "Sorry to interrupt you, but we would prefer not to mention it," the queen interjected. "It is a thing of the past and the two of us want to put that matter behind us." Nadine blinked in surprise. "Really? Yes, so let us not speak about it anymore." As the only one present who knew that the two parties were grossly misunderstanding each other, Silvani felt bad to not say anything. But right now was not a good time to come clear. "We would rather talk about you a bit," Silvani's father said, shifting to a more cheerful tone. I would like to reiterate that my visiting your majesties is unofficial and must remain apolitical," Nadine emphasized, sounding a bit startled. "Don't worry, knowing Sil, she already has that covered anyway." "Still, we would have liked to at least hear the news." "A lot of things happened and we didn't get the opportunity," Silvani quickly stated. "Yes, we already heard about your deed. Without you, our daughter would have died, and we can't express our thanks enough." "Good," the princess thought. "It seems like the conversation is on a decent track now. Your selflessness becomes all the more impressive when considering how unfit for survival your kind seems." And we're right back at it. The rest of the conversation was thankfully not too long. There were, of course, a few more inappropriate remarks from the royal couple, but nothing major. Besides that, they didn't probe for much information, and Nadine was again able to keep her anger well enough in check. The talks were cut short when duty called for the king and queen again. After telling them that a meal would be served soon, they had inquired in advance what to get for Nadine, as well as insisting on a promise that they would talk again. The two left them alone. For a few tigs, Nadine and Silvani sat there in silence. Then, when they were sure the king and queen couldn't hear them anymore, they spoke at the same time. "I'm so sorry." What?" the two said in unison. "Why are you apologizing?" Silvani asked, confused. "Because I almost lost it." "Did you not notice?" "I did, but it's not like I can blame you." "Sil, I know you said they are rather laid back, but they're still the king and queen. I can't just laugh in their faces." The room fell quiet again as Silvani needed a few moments to process the last sentence. "Laugh? Yeah, I was this close to laughing my ass off. Like when they said." She started chuckling. "Oh crap, I can't even think about it, ha 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 ha." The princess was at a loss for words. All this time, Nadine hadn't held back her anger, but her laughter? Is it normal for humans to find entertainment in something like this? Nadine had to take multiple deep breaths before she was able to answer. "Well, okay, to be fair, a real human dignitary probably would have felt insulted from being told." Told. The rest of her sentence was drowned in another wave of laughter. "Phew. Nadine called out once she had finally calmed down. Wow, I really needed that. I don't know why, but somehow I feel a lot better now. Guess we eat and then it's time to go? Yes, let's call for it, Silvani agreed as she stood up, still a bit perplexed. She opened the door and informed the servant, who took a bow and left. By the way, the princess asked as she returned inside. What you mentioned about humans using their clan name. Don't you dare call me Miss Von Clot, I'm at least 10 cycles too young for that. Miss? Not lady? I know she said she was closer to a commoner, but I never really asked to what degree. And why is it related to age? She really had a lot to figure out about humans, but I'm surprised they're so chill about Kirteen, Nadine then pointed out. From what you told me about them, I didn't expect them to be so forgiving. Right. The Princess and the Human, Book 2 Chapter 17, leaving the hospital behind her, Silvani entered one of the 2 shuttles parked on the forecourt, accompanied by 2 of her guards, with the rest of them entering the other one. Inside, Nadine was already waiting for her. That was quick, the small alien wondered, was it? Silvani didn't feel like it was. After they finished talking to her parents, they went on their way back to the Star Palace, but made a quick stop at the hospital first so the princess could visit her brother. Nadine didn't accompany her this time, arguing that she had already spoken with Kirteen and that the 2 should have a moment to themselves. Well, okay. Not that quick, just quicker than I expected. The doors closed and she sat down. There wasn't much to discuss. I gave him a late congratulation on his first molting, and then we talked about his recovery a bit. He also was quite busy. The shuttle took off and they left Homie's capital behind them. As soon as they left the city's border, they ascended, reaching travel altitude so they could go faster. Nadine leaned forward in her seat and looked out of the window, her gaze wandering notably, looking for something? I was trying to see the... What was the name of the one you grew up in? Sun Palace, Silvani reminded her. Right, that one. Is it as big as the other one? No, but close. You won't see it from here though. The Sun Palace is more like a private estate. It wasn't constructed with the intent to present it to the public. Oh. Well, not that big of a deal, I was just curious. She leaned back again. No guards were sitting on her side, which, combined with her own short height, made the humans part of the shuttle look almost hilariously empty. Speaking of curious, the reason I said Kirteen was busy was that he was studying. Something he barely did with his tutors, but now he's doing it on his own. How did you manage to convince him of that? Nadine blinked. Didn't? Are you sure? Yeah, we caught up on stuff and then we played a bit, that was it. How strange, Silvani mused. He seemed very motivated for some reason. He also announced that he had decided what he wanted to learn. Economics. The statement hung in the air for a few tigs, but in the end, Nadine merely shrugged, combined with a face that seemed to express cluelessness. While it was about time for him to make this choice, Silvani hadn't expected him to suddenly do so seemingly out of nowhere. Strange indeed. Well, at least this wasn't a total disaster, the princess finally said. While I would have liked to spend this time with something more productive, it didn't go nearly as bad as I feared. Nadine quietly looked out of the window for a moment before answering, productive. She quietly mumbled but dropped the point before Silvani could ask what she meant. By the way, what would you say is seen as more important, the first or second molting? Socially, I mean. For nobles, it's the second one, she explained to the alien girl. It is considered to be the beginning of our adulthood, the point when we become proper members of our clan. But commoners put more emphasis on the first one, I believe. Are you asking because of Kirteen? Yeah, he seemed pretty down about us missing it. She let out a deep sigh. And of course. This is a commoner versus noble topic again. Silvani leaned back in her seat and looked up at the ceiling. Thinking back, the small alien had often subtly or occasionally openly expressed her displeasure with the divide between these two groups. And in certain points, the princess agreed. There were some aspects to it that were, in her opinion, unnecessarily restrictive. But small changes were a different topic than a whole other system. While other species in the alliance had varying versions of it, there was always some form of ruling class. And yet, humans had apparently no such concept, not anymore at least. I heard a bit about it from the doctor, but we never really spoke about it, so say. How does your planet function without royalty? Who governs if not your nobles? Well, if I were born a couple hundred years earlier, I would probably be a noble in the same way you are familiar with. But we axed our noble class, mostly at least. Axed? Got rid of. As I said, it's nothing but a fancy name nowadays, at least in my country. But Earth isn't a monolith like Homie is, and there are many different versions. Democracy, while flawed, is widely considered the best system we currently know of, but even that has many variants. I heard Japan was about to try some algorithm-based election, but we left Earth before they implemented it, so I don't know how that turned out. So basically, the commoners choose who governs? Silvani tried to clarify before Nadine's thoughts trailed off too far. In theory, yes. Reality is a bit more complicated. It's primarily meant to stop individuals from having too much power over a too long time span. Plus, without nobles, we have significantly less political bullshit going on. Nadine, I get that you come from a different culture, Silvani chimed in. But please keep in mind that our system developed for a reason as well. Without it, Kirteen could have had a normal childhood. The small alien interrupted her, metaphorically knocking the air out of Silvani. The princess got quiet. After a few moments in silence, Nadine let out a sigh. Sil, look, I'm sorry, that was a bit direct. I have no doubt in my mind that you will be a great ruler. Do you remember what you said when we talked about important people? Power is no privilege, but a duty, the princess quoted herself after thinking for a tig. Exactly. That's why I'm so sure about you. But can you be sure that down the line, things will stay that way? Also, how much trouble could the other nobles give you if they don't like what you do? Silvani considered both parts of the question carefully before answering. I'm currently not very involved in our non-foreign politics, but I do know that my parents aren't very popular among the noble clans, especially since the execution of Lord Gatmer. Why, was he wrongly accused? Or was it just more political bullshit? Well, Silvani began as she realized her slip-up. It's difficult. Anyway, my point was, it does make things a lot easier if the throne has the nobles on their side. You are right on that. But in the end, Clan Kiran rules this planet and has done so ever since the Unification War. And once I am queen, I will make sure my ideals will carry on. Even my parents, troublesome as they are, know what they are doing when it comes to governing. Nadine hummed with a nod. Sil, have you ever heard of double-taxed villages? Silvani's eyes widened as she listened to Nadine describe how border-crossing villages, technically part of two territories, could die from overtaxation. This is my first time hearing this. Silvani insisted once she was done. Of course it is, Nadine said in an almost dismissive tone. It's not important enough to concern you. Her last words cut deep and hammered home a fundamental issue. Even if she would hold absolute power as queen, she and whoever she would make king were just two. And Homie was a planet. Silvani had, of course, always known that. When she had ideas to improve things, she often gave suggestions or entire law drafts to her parents, but how much did she really know about the problems of her people? If, just hypothetically speaking, if you were queen, what would you change? Nadine brought her hand to her chin and thought for a while. Good question. Switching the entire system at once would only cause chaos, if it is even possible in the first place. The nobility is one problem, but not the only one. And besides, getting rid of them isn't easy. Speaking of, how did humans axe them, as you said? The small alien blushed a bit. Well, depends on the country, but while I meant it as an idiom, in many cases, it's a pretty apt description. Wait, you mean you? Our history is soaked with blood. What I told you before is just a small fraction of the brutality we've been through. Don't think I believe that the ends justify the means, though. For you, there are other ways, better ways. I know. How about a council? You mean, like the High Council of Eros? Silvani asked in confusion. No, not that. I meant for the commoners. It would give them a voice. A constitution would also be good. Codify the rights everyone has, and make it so they can't be changed even by king or queen unless the Council of Commoners agrees. Once Silvani had overcome her surprise and given it a thought, those were pretty interesting suggestions. She would need some maneuvering to prevent the nobles from causing trouble, but the idea sounded promising. She was still a few cycles away from the throne, but preparations could already be made, and once again, the princess was reminded of Nadine's age. It was always so bizarre to see a supposed child carry a generation's worth of knowledge. And that wasn't all. Her ancestors, each long-lived, had left much more to build upon. Humans didn't just do things differently to the Vanari. Aspects of Homi's present were like overcome past to them, if someone like her were to. For quite a while now, there was a thought she had been toying with, but could never decide whether to voice it. May I ask you a question, Nadine? HM? Sure, ask away. If once we find the other humans, what will you do? The girl's gaze fell. Unfortunately, Silvani couldn't avoid this sensitive topic right now. I don't know. I don't even know how close we are to our original destination. No clue if we even have the means to find it anymore. Or the way back to Earth. Silvani took a deep breath before her next question, and hypothetically speaking, how would you feel about staying here? Nadine looked up to her. Sil. Don't get me wrong, you and all of you are more than I could ever ask for, but I can't freeload forever. I already told you, you aren't. Forget it. No, I meant something else. The small alien cocked her head as Silvani continued. You see, once I become queen, there are many things I need to decide on. Much more diverse topics than now, many of which I understand little of. She made a short pause before finishing her thought. I will need trusted advisors. The Princess and the Human, Book 2 Chapter 18, KRNDL hated giving reports. Well, no, that was generalizing it a bit too much. Written reports were fine. Now, at least, the first time she had to give a written report, she had no idea what to do, so she had simply copied an older one that sounded like it was roughly saying the correct thing. It had been followed by a few days of dread that someone might notice, but no one had said anything. Afterward, she had scrambled together every old report could get her hands on, and then spent days trying to decipher the gibberish those things were always written in. It had been exhausting, but it put a lot of strain off her mind afterward. By now, she had a neat collection of text blocks on her datapad, and whenever she had to file a report that she couldn't delegate to someone who actually knew what they were doing, she would puzzle one together from those. It still took a while to do it like this, but at least she could produce acceptable results like this. And, as an added bonus, having to file a report was a great excuse to escape the bridge for a while. Oral reports, on the other hand, were a nightmare. Even if she was given a warning early enough in advance to prepare what she would say, it was still bad. 1. Because she had to talk to one or more people of higher rank, which she disliked on principle. If superiors didn't talk to her, it meant they had nothing to reprimand her for, and that meant she hadn't made any noteworthy mistakes. And 2. Oral reports didn't just end with the report. There was a high chance that there would be questions asked. Questions required answers, and answers provided opportunities for screw-ups. Her go-to tactic in that regard was to find someone under her command whose position had something to do with the report, make up some stupid reason why it was necessary that they accompanied her, rely on them as a backup, and hope no off-topic questions would be asked. After all the mental exhaustion following that signal had caused her, she had been glad that the patrol shift had only been a few days away. Once the new ships were on the bridgeway, KRNDL's flotilla made the jump back. 8 days did they need to reach Svegplia, time she spent to first piece together her report and then look forward to at least a short period of rest. The latter was not something she was allowed to do for long. Before they had even reached their homeworld, KRNDL received a message that upon landing, she was to report to Admiral NSCHK, one of the highest-ranking people in their navy. And even worse, she got that message when they were only halfway to the planet. In other words, she had a full 4 days to stress herself out over this meeting, time she, unfortunately, was able to use to its fullest. Now, the Hunter had finally reached their home. The cruiser itself wouldn't land at the garrison, it would go to the dock for maintenance, so instead, they boarded a shuttle to quickly bring them to their destination. KRNDL didn't complain about it. The sooner this whole ordeal would be over, the better. Once they entered the atmosphere, in an attempt to prevent her beak from clacking nervously, she looked out of the window, only to notice something. While her sense of direction wasn't great, she was fairly certain that this didn't look right. Was she imagining things? Better not say anything. Bringing them where they needed to be was the pilot's job, not hers. A few more hours passed, and she turned out to be right. They weren't at the garrison, no, they were in the capital. Why, of all places, were they here? The pilot was opening the doors, so it clearly wasn't a mistake. Oh, right, she was supposed to exit first, doing her best to stand up in a way that was fast yet didn't look rushed. KRNDL got up from her seat and left the shuttle. The entire city was built around the slope of a large crater and extending in all directions from it. The shuttle had placed them close to the edge of the crater. Behind her, Dr. Knacker and RNDZ did the same. That was about all KRNDL was able to assess until she noticed the figure awaiting her. She quickly lowered her head and crossed her arms before her face. Krasnel's traditional salute, stand, Admiral ordered, and KRNDL as well as others obliged. Then, she waited. Despite everything, KRNDL knew enough about common procedures to be aware that she wasn't expected to give her report out in the open. There was no military facility nearby, but surely, the Admiral had something in mind. Why else would he want to meet her here? Her assumption proved correct. NSCHK turned, gesturing them to follow. And together, they walked up the remaining bit to the edge of the crater. The caldera itself was a lot smaller than it appeared from the outside, and not very deep either. It contained a plain of untouched nature safe for a singular building that looked almost anachronistic compared to the surrounding city. It was called the House of Memories. They went down the stairs, followed by a short walk over to the building. KRNDL said nothing, which was, of course, expected from her. But she would have been quiet regardless because there was no way she would have been able to formulate a functioning sentence right now. All her mental capacity was needed to keep her walking. Maybe she should have connected the dots earlier. But now it was clear that she wasn't just expected to report to the Admiral. No, they would be meeting one of the elders. KRNDL had always been convinced that the day she would stand before an elder would be the day something had fundamentally gone wrong in her life. And right now, she wasn't exactly confident that it hadn't. This had to be about the dead alien they had found, and if so, She was infinitely thankful that her past self had the presence of mind to bring the doctor with her. The interior of the building matched its exterior in terms of looking ancient, though KRNDL didn't have enough historical knowledge to say whether or not this was how their houses used to look in the distant past. Or why. All she knew was that it served as the seat of their government, the four elders. Each of them reigned over one of the core aspects of their society, and each had absolute authority in their domain. Two or more of them meeting for discussion was something that only happened when those domains intersected, usually for matters of great importance. The Admiral opened a door and KRNDL entered. All four elders were looking at her, the door of Silvani's office closed. And the princess allowed herself to lean back in her chair. That was one item off the list. The last two Indus had been spent discussing the topic of the child and the ward of Clan Silpiine coming to the Star Palace following Nadine's idea. Now that she thought about it, they still needed to come up with a name for this position, as the translator refused to turn it into a usable word. Next, she would need to plan the trials of all the spies they had caught. It was something that should have already happened a while ago, and would have, had the whole ordeal with Eros not happened. Another thing that was long due was the ceremony for as if on cue, there was a knock on her door. And upon being called in, Nadine entered. Good timing, I just finalized our agreement with Clan Silpiine. I take it you are prepared for whatever you have in mind for the son of Clan Ryler? I didn't have as much time as I had hoped, but I have a few things, the small alien affirmed, and... Did you have time to think about my proposal? The princess inquired. It's still a few cycles in the future, so you don't have to answer now if not. I did, but... I'm not sure. Don't get me wrong, I wouldn't mind staying with you and helping where I can, it's just... There are still so many uncertainties. But, speaking of, assuming I were to permanently stay here, there would be some things I would need. Exercises wouldn't be enough. Of course, I will make sure all your requirements are met to our best possibility. Yeah, possibility is exactly the point I was getting at. I don't know exactly how your artificial gravity works, so I wanted to ask one of your mechanics I befriended, but I couldn't find him. His name is Lizo. That name rang a bell. Silvani grabbed her datapad and opened the employee files to confirm her suspicion. Lizo. Ah, yes. He was let go shortly after the emergency protocol ended. Nadine's eyes got wide. What? Why? He endangered two high-priority individuals by taking you and Kirtine on a shuttle without checking the fuel. And then he slept on duty. Her expression hardened. Only us two? Then what are Rinkus and Quiera, low priority? Forget it, she sighed. Anyway, shouldn't he at least get a second chance? Please don't take offense to this, Nadine, but I think you aren't fully grasping the scope of his error. Besides, that already was his second chance anyway. Maida recorded an admonishment in his file, just a few days prior to that. Nadine didn't seem satisfied with the answer. Though this time, it seemed rather childish to Silvani. Well, despite everything, she is a child. Maybe I should just switch the topic for now. By the way, we also still need to plan your award ceremony. That certainly got a reaction out of the small alien. Crap, I completely forgot about that. I know I already asked that, but does it have to be a public ceremony? Can't I just get the medal and be done with it? No can do, the princess chuckled. Besides, you're not getting a medal. You're getting an honorary title along with an estate and a ship. What? Sil, that's appropriate by our traditions, Silvani stated. If it makes it easier for you to accept, it would be very bad for my reputation to give you any less than that. The alien girl fell quiet for a moment. Will the ship have a crew? Well, it won't be a big one, but a few people would be needed, yes. Can I decide who gets hired for that? Of course, it'll be your ship. Why are you asking? KRNDL stood to the side, glad how quickly the focus of the conversation had shifted away from her. Knacker was now the center of attention as he explained in great detail what he had learned about the alien from his autopsy. And you are certain it had no weapon on it? Oh, shoot, that wasn't a medical question. Was she supposed to answer that? The only weapons we found on board were those of the Karaska, each lying next or close to its deceased owner. RNDZ explained to her relief. Do you have any idea how a single being could achieve such a feat? The elder on the right asked. KRNDL had no idea how either of them were called. The body was incredibly dense. Knacker took the word again. It was so heavy we had trouble even getting it on board. It stands to reason that it would have the strength to match its mass. There are hypotheses about potential life developing under higher gravity, and while they are disputed, this find seems to back it up. That's all well and good, the only elder that hadn't spoken so far said, but if my memory serves me right, then we have a more pressing matter at hand. While he said that, a servant came rushing in, bowed, and then gave something to the elder. Ah, finally, the elder commented, took it, and seemingly compared it to the pictures Knacker had made during his autopsy. Yes, no doubt, that is the same species. How unfortunate, had we gotten this report a few days prior, we could have told the messenger about it. Oh well, it is how it is. Captain. This time, it was clear that they were referring to her. KRNDL stepped forth. As soon as the maintenance of your ship is done, gather your crew. You will travel to Homie and tell the Vannery of your findings. The Princess and the Human, Book 2 Chapter 19. As the Star Palace drew closer and closer, Falpine's nervousness grew bigger and bigger. Over the course of the last few days, it had seemed more like an abstract thought, a distant idea rather than something real. But now, with their shuttle heading straight to the centerpiece of Homie's foreign politics, it was clear as day just how real this was. She still had no idea how this had happened. When Lady Nadine had for whatever reason told them in advance about this new project Her Highness was setting up, she had left quite abruptly shortly after. Everyone present had assumed that even though she had claimed otherwise, Falpine and Ryukin had indeed offended her one way or the other, and that it was simply not the human way to outright state that. After all, there was no way a rumor about some ship starting on the other side of the planet had been the reason why the foreign ambassador had suddenly decided to go. No, for her to leave so unceremoniously and without long final words, something had to have been wrong. And to say that Falpine's parents had been angry at the two because of it would be quite an understatement, but regardless, they still decided to apply her and Ryukin for this new tutelage program of the princess. Low as their chances were, Lady Nadine had given them this piece of valuable knowledge, so they were going to use it. Quite some time passed without an answer, and the obvious conclusion had been that their request had been denied and subsequently ignored. When a mere count contacted someone like the princess, not receiving an answer was a common occurrence. But then, more than 30 days later, they suddenly got an answer regardless. And on top of that, it was a positive one. Things had been really quick after that. Her parents had been called for a personal meeting with the princess with only a day of prior notice, and the next thing Falpine knew was that she was sitting in a shuttle with Ryukin. Their vehicle slowed down as it prepared for landing. The palace was massive, far greater than the estate of Clan Silpine, and easily the biggest building Falpine had ever seen in her life. She had seen it before in pictures, of course, but seeing it in reality was something else entirely. It felt intimidating to look at. The shuttle landed and the doors opened. When Falpine extended her two left arms, her brother clung to them as if his life depended on it. She took a deep breath. Shall we depart? Duke Ryukin? She asked him with a shaky voice. Ill-timed as may have been to use her frequent tease right now, it was the only distraction she could think of right now to calm her nerves at least a little bit. Why yes, let's, he stammered back, not even attempting a rebuttal. Maybe he hadn't really noticed what she had just called him. But there was no point in delaying it any further, so with another deep breath, the two stood up and she guided him outside. Ryukin flinched as the first water drops landed on him. "Ah, right, it's raining," Falpiine quickly apologized. "Sorry, forgot to tell you." It's fine, I should have known." Thankfully the shuttle had parked fairly close to the main gate. The doors were already open and two lines of servants awaited them. Doing her best to not pull Ryukin with her too quickly, she stepped inside and out of the rain. From the servants, a woman stepped forth. "Welcome. I am Maida, head maid of the Star Palace. Please, come closer." Falpiine hadn't realized that they were still standing in the doorframe. She took a step forward so quickly that she almost made Ryukin fall, but the two managed to catch themselves and went to the center of the entrance hall, without too big embarrassment. More servants came closer, two of them holding what seemed to be a green cloth. One of the others went to Falpiine and ready to tell, and she quickly understood what they were about to do. Just as she wanted to warn her brother so he wouldn't startle, another servant spoke. "I'm going to dry you off now, milord," he said before patting him dry. Falpi was surprised. Even servants from other clans, of course, rarely were this considerate of him. "I'm going to put a sash on you now, milord," another announced, and the two got a piece of cloth wrapped around their shoulder and hip. Falpi noticed that it had the same shade of green as the uniforms the servants were wearing. Once the procedure was over, Maida asked them to follow her. The head maid matched their pace perfectly, always maintaining the exact same distance to them while also being considerate that guiding her brother slowed Falpine's walking speed. Eventually, they reached a door at the end of the corridor. On the other side was Princess Silvani, sitting behind a desk. Greetings, Your Highness," Falpiine said, maybe slightly louder than intended. She let go of Ryukin for a moment and folded her arms in the traditional greeting. Her brother, understanding from her shout what was going on, did the same. Once it was done, Falpiine looked up to the princess. Even while sitting, she was huge. She gestured for the two to take a seat across from her, and the Silpiine heiress quickly guided her brother to his chair, before sitting down herself. The headmaid left, leaving the three alone in the room. "Did you have a pleasant travel?" "Yes, Your Highness." She was still too loud. "Good. Then let me explain some things to you. You have probably already guessed it from the sashes, but just to remind you, you are no guests here. You are here to learn, and to work. You will gain insight into the inner workings of the palace, and will assist me in my tasks, all while hopefully getting a better understanding of the duties you will eventually need to fulfill as heirs of your respective clans." Falpiine nodded. Green was the color of the princess, everyone knew that. The fact that they wearing these sashes meant they were now directly affiliated with her. "Your Highness," Ryukin then said, speaking for the first time since entering the palace. "Can I mean, my sister." "Sure, but can I really do this?" The princess was quiet for a moment. "I will be honest with you," she finally said. "I don't know. This situation is just as new to me. We will have to see how much is possible." The doubts in her words were clear, but the fact that she was willing to consider it already said a lot. Ever since the accident, the ducal clans were all in agreement that Clan Ryler was done for, and yet, the princess herself was not as ready to agree. Falpiine didn't need to look at her brother to know how much these words meant to him. "But I doubt it'll surprise you that the two of you won't be doing the same things, for obvious reasons," continued her explanation. "Lady Falpiine will stay here with me. At first, you will either watch me as I work or accompany my steward. After that, you will be given tasks on your own, simple ones at first, but gradually, you will get more and more involved. Meanwhile, you will come with me." The sudden sound of another voice startled Falpiine so much that she almost jumped out of her chair. There had only been the three of them in the room. When had a fourth person entered? And on top of that, the person who had so quietly entered wasn't just anyone, it was Lady Nadine. Falpine's body grew stiff as she watched the alien ambassador walk into their field of view until she stood next to the princess's desk. Why was she here? This matter shouldn't involve her. From the corner of her eye, she could also see that Ryakin's mouth was hanging open a bit, though he said nothing. Right, there was no way he wouldn't recognize her voice. I'm sure you have, Lady Nadine. Falpine blurted out before she realized that the alien had begun to speak as well. Lady Nadine stopped and looked at her, slightly tilting her head to the side. In that moment, the Silpiine heiress wanted nothing more than to just disappear. It had been vague what had offended the human during her visit, but just now, that was an unforgivable blunder. How could something like this happen? How to hold formal conversations had been part of her education, and yet, this situation was far beyond anything her teacher had ever prepared her for. My deepest apologies, I didn't mean to interrupt, she quickly added and lowered her head. No, it's fine. Go on. Once again, Falpine was stumped. This wasn't at all how she had been taught situations like this would play out. Was Lady Nadine giving her a second chance? If so, why? Then again, she couldn't afford to not take it. I merely wanted to apologize for our behavior during your visit. We acted highly improperly. But I wish to clarify that I was the driving factor behind this. Lord Ryakin's position left him little choice but to follow me. What? That's not true. Her brother loudly refuted her statement. It is. I dragged you with me, you didn't even notice until we were almost there. But, if I may shorten this, Lady Nadine spoke again, I've already told you I've taken no offense. In fact, I'm glad you did what you did. The step-siblings stared at the alien in silence. Human culture differs from ours in many aspects, Her Highness explained. But let this also be a lesson for you. Responsibility is something you have, not something you can just take afterward. People see results, not what happens behind the scenes. As a noble, you must think beforehand what impacts your decision may have on others. Whatever the truth behind all of this may be matters little when it comes to such things. Fact is, you two ended up doing it together, and that's what people see. That's also true, Lady Nadine agreed. Caught together, hang together. I apologize, Falpi said once again, but I'm not sure I know what you're referring to. The expression on the human's face changed notably. Oh, that's just a saying, ignore it. What do you mean with hanged? Ryakin asked curiously. Like hanging decor on the wall? No. Hanging is, was an old execution method. You tie a noose around someone's neck and then drop them off a ledge or something like that. Now all three looked at her. Well, Ryakin of course didn't actually look, but he had, maybe out of reflex, turned his head in her direction. Aren't there quicker methods? Falpine eventually asked. Law hadn't been the most expansive part of her lessons yet, but she knew that criminals sentenced to death were normally executed with a shot to the head. Well, it wasn't supposed to be quick. At least not until the long drop was invented. Besides being a punishment, it was also meant to be a public deterrent, which is why the bodies would often be left there for days. So too, she then interrupted herself, as if she was only now realizing what she was saying. We're not doing that anymore. I didn't mean to. Shit, it really need to stop using idioms. Yes, while I'm sure our historians would love to hear about your people's past, let's get back on topic, shall we? Yes. I'm sorry for the side tangent, so let's just say your apologies are accepted and move on. What I was trying to say before I got sidetracked, I am sure you have many questions as to why I am here with you. And I will answer them, but there is something we need to do first. She put 2 sheets in front of them. It may seem strange to you, but my people give little weight to the spoken word, no matter the rank of the speaker. This is what humans call a non-disclosure agreement. Imagine it like a contract. By signing, you pledge secrecy about the things you're about to hear from this moment onwards. Falpiine cocked her head. When it came to commoners, sure, but why wouldn't humans trust the word of a noble? Was there really a need to make a contract about it? A physical one even. I can guess what you are thinking, the princess quickly said, but remember what I said earlier. Besides, if you were open to it, you might find the way humans do certain things to be intriguing, to say the least. I certainly did. This whole tutelage program is one such example, by the way. Wait, so Lady Nadine hadn't just heard of this, she is the one responsible for it? The human walked around the table until she stood right next to Ryukin. I'm sorry if I sound condescending, but can you sign it on your own? Yes, he answered. I just need to know where. Falpiine drew the line crest of her clan at the end of the document and then guided her brother's hand. Once that was done, Lady Nadine gave them an affirming nod. Good, now that that's out of the way, during your time here, you will eventually learn some classified information not just about confidential political matters of Homie, but also about me and my people. Hence the agreement. Therefore, I think it's best to clear some things up right from the start. First, while you two are here for your own benefit, Her Highness is also in dire need of some extra pairs. Extra sets of hands. There are a lot of things going on right now, which directly leads to my second point. I am not humanity's ambassador.